Now one of those rare gems, a story that lifts you up and inspires your own life. It's a story of a homeless, penniless man who did something unimaginable. He was living in a Subway restroom with his baby boy until a little luck and a lot of determination changed everything. Oh, and did I mention brains too? Bob Brown's story just might make you think twice the next time you pass judgment on a homeless person.
A lot of deals have come and gone since the one that made Chris Gardner a millionaire.
All right, so now look, on the third, we'll do this thing.
He is the head of his own brokerage firm
Oh, God.
and lives in a Chicago townhouse, one of 3 homes, with a collection of tailored suits, designer shoes, and Miles Davis albums. This is where he used to live on occasion, when he was homeless and wondering how to make the money for his next meal. It is a bathroom at a Bay Area rapid transit station in Oakland, California. How in God's name, people wonder, did he get from here
Hello, sir. How are you?
to here?
Would you recommend that other young men go about getting into business, establishing themselves the way that you did?
Oh, hell no.
You're not a role model
Oh,
in that
no.
sense?
I make it a point to say to them, I met some people you're not going to meet, I got some breaks you're not going to get, and the world has changed tremendously.
Chris Gardner's path from homelessness to owning his own brokerage firm took more turns than a limousine trying to maneuver its way through rush hour traffic. And the best way to hear about it is to go along for the ride. He was raised by his mother, a school teacher. They moved from rural Louisiana to Milwaukee when he was 6.
Mothers have a way of saying things. She explained to me, son, there's only one Miles Davis and he got that job. So you have to do something else.
After 4 years in the Navy, Gardner got a job at a VA hospital in San Francisco. He was a kid without a college degree who learned quickly. He became a medical supply salesman, supporting a common-law wife and a young son. But he reached a turning point in his life when, in a parking lot one day, he met a man who drove a red Ferrari.
And I asked him 2 questions that basically changed my life. What do you do, and how do you do that? Turns out this gentleman was a stockbroker who was making $80,000 a month.
That was all the motivation Gardner needed to start knocking on doors, applying for a training program at a brokerage, even though it meant he would have to live on next to nothing while he learned.
But I was able to convince him over time to give me an opportunity. I quit my job with the understanding that I would be starting in a training program.
And then his plans suddenly collapsed. The man who offered him the training slot was fired, and Chris Gardner had no job to go back to. What were you doing?
I cut grass, I did yard work, I did roofing, I cleaned basements to take care of my family.
The toughest times were still to come. Gardner was hauled off to jail for $1,200 in parking violations that he couldn't pay, and his wife left him. Finally, a sympathetic broker got him into a training program. But when his wife then asked him to care for their young son without her, it was something he felt he couldn't refuse to do despite his sudden lack of resources.
You didn't know your father.
I met my father for the first time when I was 28 years old. And I made up my mind as a young kid that when I had children, my children were going to know who their father was. There was never a doubt in my mind.
But that chain of circumstances had added up to a large problem. Gardner wound up with no place to live because the boarding house where he moved after his wife left didn't accept children. He was collecting a meager stipend as a brokerage trainee, so like an estimated 15% of the homeless population, he was employed. He just didn't have the ability to make ends meet. When he could afford it, he stayed with his son Chris Jr. in cheap motels with room rates as low as $10 a day. And on the days when he couldn't afford the motel rate, still dreaming of a Wall Street career, he found a place to stay here in a nearby Bay Area rapid transit station.
It was a choice. You eat or you stay in a hotel. We chose to eat. We stayed in the subway station. We rode the trains. We slept in bathrooms.
In a visit that left both men shaken, Chris Jr., who was now a 21-year-old college student, returned here with us and his father for the first time since he was a baby. Although he has no memory of being here, his father thought it was important for him to see it.
I can't even imagine what it was like for him, let alone myself, because I didn't know nothing.
In this public restroom, Gardner could bathe his son in the sink and lock the door when they needed time.
No one is supposed to live in here. No one is supposed to just spend extended periods of time in here. This is a public restroom. This is not a living space. But were it not for this space, there were some days we would have had no place else to go. I mean, a lot of decisions, a lot of hard decisions were made right here about what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there?
So, how does a down-and-out father with no job go from living in a public restroom to becoming a millionaire? As Bob Brown picks up the story, Chris Gardner is moving on up from the mean street to Wall Street.
The first memory the Reverend Cecil Williams had of Chris Gardner is when Gardner stood with his infant son in a food line outside Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco. Even to Reverend Williams, it was an unusual sight.
You didn't see much of that at all?
No. There's a lot of women with babies, but not a man with a baby. And it just kind of began to be a rather regular scene where Chris appeared.
He had a program for homeless women with children. And I say, obviously, I'm not a woman, but I am homeless. I have a child. I need some place to stay to get myself together. And he let me in.
And all this time you're studying for the brokerage license?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Now, with Williams' help and encouragement, and a room supplied by Glide Memorial when he needed it, Gardner not only made it through the brokerage training program, he got his license on the first try. He owned 2 suits, which he wore on alternate days. He placed his son in daycare, and he went to work making cold calls at the firm of Dean Witter.
Did anyone at Dean Witter know that you were homeless?
No.
Did you try to hide it from them, or did you?
No, they didn't need to know. They knew this. I was the first one at work. I was the last one to leave. They never figured it out. Sometimes I was sleeping under my desk. I'd get up before anybody got to work, freshen up as best I could, and I'd be on the phone. 200 phone calls a day. That's what they noticed. Every time I picked up that phone, I was digging my way out of this hole.
In 1987, with $10,000 in capital, Chris Gardner opened his own company in his home, Chicago, benefiting, among other things, from government and pension fund rules that created business for minority brokers.
What's happening? How we doing?
He built the company into an institutional brokerage firm, now in a complex of offices in Chicago's financial district. Ironically, when San Francisco's Bay Area Rapid Transit System issued new bonds to raise money a few years ago, one of the underwriters was Chris Gardner's company, run by a man who, when he was homeless, had bathed his son in the bathroom of its train station. The Ferrari he now owns has a message on the license plate that says, "Not MJ, not Michael Jordan."
What does that mean?
It means I'm not a ball player. And it never fails. I've had it said to me many, many times by young black men. I never saw somebody driving a car like that wasn't a ball player or a drug dealer. So no, sir, I'm in business. I play on Wall Street, playing the big game. Whole different ball game.